Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of College Financial Prep's Preparing for College podcast. I'd like to welcome Dr. Marc Miller, great colleague, friend. I'm so pleased that he can join us today. And we're going to be talking about the topic of transitions. Lots of transitions here. Welcome, Marc. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you for the introduction. I am Dr. Marc Miller. Actually, you'll see my initials after my name. Ph.D. is a doctorate in clinical psychology. PCC stands for Professional Certified Coach. At this point in my career, I don't do therapy. I do coaching, which is somewhat different, and we're not going to spend any time on that. But Vicki and I were just talking not too long ago about issues that are very relevant to parents and kids going through the transition of leaving high school, going to college. And that's one area of interest of mine and where Vicki certainly has a lot of expertise. And we're hoping just to have a great conversation about it that'll be helpful to whoever is going to be watching the podcast.
Right. And then in addition to that, it's not only the kids that go through this transition of leaving home and going off to college. It's also the parents that go through a huge transition. All of a sudden the child leaves and
Absolutely.
Lots of transitions. Where to begin? The kids are all getting, certainly by senior year, they're ready to leave the nest, and then they get to school and maybe feeling homesick, and then you have the parents that are worried about how is their child going to do once they get to school. What let's dive in. What's your advice for people? Kids, adults?
Fasten your seatbelts and get ready for the crazy ride ahead of you. And I think it's an important point, Vicki, that it's not only the young person who's transitioning and leaving home, which can be a big step for a lot of kids. A lot of kids have been to camp, so going away for the summer can be a little adventure away from home, and that can become part of their lives if they're fortunate enough to go away to sleepaway camp. But going to college is different. And there are a lot of changes and a lot of things that the young person may be frightened about, uncomfortable about, maybe not having anticipated any of that beforehand. Perhaps some kids worry more than others. And the other side of the equation is very much the parents who are launching their child into an environment far away from them, if they're going away to school. And that can raise a lot of questions and issues and feelings on both the parent side and the kid side. We can talk a lot more about either and both of those dynamics.
Right now, when we're recording this, it's the start of the fall semester. Kids may be feeling homesick. They may be relaying that to their parents, and then their parents worry. What advice do you have for the parents when their kids call home and are feeling homesick and lost?
Well, you mentioned camp, and not every family chooses or can afford to send their kids to sleepaway camp. Those who
and I can say I know some kids that choose not to go. So
some kids want to be at home and feel the comfort of being home. That really reflects a lot about both the children and the parents. What has preceded it, how much experience the kid has had in leaving the nest, and how much experience the parents have had in having their child leave the nest. And there are a lot of different kinds of reactions to it. Some kids can't wait to leave and have a wonderful time away from home and away from the surveillance of their parents, the freedom of being at college. And some kids are terrified by it. Some kids are very social and gregarious and can get along very easily with new friends and new people who they meet. Some kids are on the quiet and shy side and have some trouble adjusting to that. The child who calls home, "Take me home, I don't want to be here, save me," very often that's going to pull at the heartstrings, so to speak, of the parents. And depending on on the parent's personality and the relationship he or she has had with their child, they may want to rescue the kid. "I'm going to be there tomorrow and I'll take you out." Most parents, when they've made the commitment and the investment of money and everything else to send their kid away to a college away from home, are not going to just be quick to do that. The advice that I think you're asking about is, how do parents help their child calm down? But what I always think of is the relationship between the two or three people involved in a family dynamic, in a relationship. What's going on for the parent? If the parent is feeling like, "Oh my God, my baby is gone, and I'm alone. I mean, if you're a single parent, you can, and that child is your youngest or your only child who's gone away, it's really like an empty nest experience. And even if parents,
I'm going to stop you for 1 second. My apologies, everyone. My dog was knocking at the door to come in.
And as a very good mother, you were quick to respond. You rescued the poor little doggy. So
Yes.
maybe that is a nice analogy. We're not comparing children and dogs, but sometimes dogs have a better relationship with their parent than the kid does. Maybe for you as a parent, that feeling of, oh my God, my child is hurting. She or he is really having a tough time. I better help them out by rescuing them. Better to help talk them through it, help them put things in perspective, be as calm as you can be. And if you're feeling anxious, how do you calm yourself down? There are a lot of techniques and ways of just, calming yourself down, centering yourself, putting things in perspective. Don't panic. If your child is panicking and you panic, it's a recipe for intensifying panic, which can really become a big problem. If you can take a few deep breaths, maybe talk to whomever can be there to help you put things in perspective and calm down, you'll be better able to communicate with your child and help them put it in perspective. This is new. This is different. You are away from the security and safety of home. And it's important to give it a try and do the best you can to calm yourself down, make some friends, at least begin that process of making this a positive transition. And then there are other kids who are just very comfortable being away from home. There's so many different variations. Everybody's different, every child's different, and every parent is different. There are no, go ahead. I'm sorry, Vicki. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. Well, let me tell everybody. First of all, most people know me, and you may know me too, divorce and college planning. Mark and I actually met a good number of years ago because we're both certified divorce coaches. Obviously, we focus on very different things, but you brought up parenting and how to handle it. What happens in the case where the parents are divorced? The child could be speaking with both parents. The parents may have to come together and talk about it, and they may feel differently. Can you give advice to those parents how best to communicate with one another, how to work together on their in regards to their child?
Yes, such a big question. And my answer is if parents after divorce are still harboring angry feelings toward one another, they're antagonistic with each other, they really haven't resolved emotionally the trauma of divorce, whoever initiated it, whatever the underlying issues, I think everybody knows, at least intellectually, that for the good of the child or children, get your act together, get past your emotional upset and resentment as much as you can, because you're going to be co-parenting in some ways your children, even when they're not children anymore. And the step from graduating high school and going to college away from home is a big step in that process. If you and your ex-spouse are not communicating well, are still engaged in the kind of negative interactions that so often happen, and it can impact, it has impacted and will continue to impact your child or children until you work it out, and individually and in relation to your ex-spouse. So that's a whole area of work for yourself individually, whether with a coach, with a therapist. It's also a good possibility that isn't exercised too often, but when parents after a divorce are having problems communicating with each other and communicating with their child or children because of the continued antagonism between the parents, it would really be great, if possible, to seek a coach or a counselor who can help you together resolve some of the issues that you didn't work through in your marriage. You may not have worked through satisfactorily through your divorce, whether you've gone to attorneys or you've gone to a mediator. Sometimes a lot of those feelings still remain. And actually, whether you do it individually or together with your ex-partner, your ex-spouse, there's tremendous amount of value that can be benefited from for you and your child and children. Because if you don't have that together, you may be giving different messages. You may be contradicting each other. You may be undermining each other, and your child is the one who's going to suffer. More together, and it's the cliche, through a marriage, even a bad marriage, parents should always give the same message. It doesn't always happen. And certainly after a divorce, it often doesn't happen. If you're saying to your kid, hold in there, hang in there, it'll work out for the best, you're helping he or he to deal with the emotional stress of being away from home. And your ex-spouse is saying, no, you can come home. I don't want you to suffer. Where the kid is just going to be confused, and that'll probably make things worse. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's not an easy one to resolve. But
Definitely.
but every parents love their kid, and if they're sharing their kid with another person who they're not married to anymore, for the sake of your kid, try to work it out to the best of your ability.
Definitely. Thank you. Now, how to help those parents get through the transition? You can have a single parent that now all of a sudden has no one at home anymore.
Yes.
Kid is off to school. That's a whole other transition.
Right. And for some parents, that may seem like, what a relief. I'm free at last. And,
it could be. It could be.
And you may think that ahead of time, but when you are alone at home, if that is your only child who has been launched, or your youngest child who has been launched, and I know nowadays it's hard sometimes to launch your kids even after they graduate from college. They can be in your basement or somewhere. But being alone is an adjustment. It is a big transition. And even if you're divorced and you are single and you may be dating, you may not be dating, whatever you're doing, having that high school kid or college age kid in your home makes a very big difference. And it can feel like being abandoned. It can feel like being alone. It can feel very lonely. You feel like your purpose in life has disappeared because being a parent has been your main focus for a lot of parents.
Well, and that could be true regardless if you're married or divorced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ideally, if you're in a marriage and your marriage is a solid one where you really can communicate and support one another, that makes it so much easier. But that's the ideal. And as we know,
Life happens.
the divorce rate is 50%. Is always the number that's given, whether it's a little higher or a little lower, who knows. But having a good marriage, if those people, for those people who are lucky enough or fortunate enough to have a solid relationship with their partner or spouse, God bless them. That makes a big difference. But oftentimes that doesn't even happen, whether people get divorced or not. It's these are tough issues. Facing being alone can be tough for the parent who no longer has that child who's the focus of so much time and energy, good and bad, enjoyable and frightening in some ways with adolescent kids.
Any tips to help them through?
Breathe deeply.
Very, very true.
Take some nice deep breaths, practice meditation. Obviously, those are possibilities, but I'm being a little snide and making it so simplistic. Talk to trusted friends and people you can turn to for input about their experiences. But other people are not you. Oftentimes you get advice that may have worked for somebody else, but is not going to work for you. I'm a little biased, but I think that consulting a professional, either a therapist or a coach, can be valuable just to get more of a neutral, objective perspective that can help you reflect on what's going on for you and to help you figure out emotionally and intellectually how to move forward and cope with the change in your life.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Easier said than done, but for all of this.
Of course. No, it's just speaking with so many parents. I see I see what everybody's dealing with, and hey, I'm a mom myself. I've gone through it myself. It's part of life. The kids grow up, and it's amazing how quickly it happens.
You don't want them to stay babies forever. You don't want them to stay dependent forever. Although sometimes there's a comfort in it. And when they transition to the next stage in their lives, sometimes it can feel for a lot of people like a loss of identity, a loss of companionship. Not that your kid should be your companion, but a lot of times that happens. Just that sense, if you have issues in your own personal history of abandonment or being alone or separation issues, it can arouse a lot of conflictual feelings and upsetting feelings when your child moves on to the next stage of her or his life. Again, therapy is not the solution for everybody. And as I said, my background is psychology and therapy. I like the idea of coaching because it tends not to define people in terms of what's wrong with them, but rather in terms of their strengths. And how do you utilize, but therapists can do that too. How do you utilize your strengths, but also be aware of your vulnerabilities and your sensitivities to get a handle on where you are? Because if you don't do that, you're going to have a tougher time helping your child adjust to their transition.
Fabulous. Thank you, Marc. I'm so glad that you were here with us today. Do me a favor. Tell us all where we can find you. I want to be in touch.
All right. You're going to post this at some point on the podcast. My name is on the screen, Marc Miller, Ph.D. The best way to reach me is actually by cell phone. I have an office phone that I'm glad didn't ring during this time, but now I've made the transition from landline, which I still pay for, to my cell phone. The number is 516-835-5977. I do have, you can contact me by email, and my professional email is Marc, M-A-R-C, at marcmillercoaching.com. And I do have a couple of websites. The one that's most relevant is the one that's not business related, but is more relationship oriented, which is www.marcmillerrelationshipanddivorcecoaching.com. It's a very long name, but if you find it, hopefully there's some information on there that can be helpful. And I'm very happy to be helpful to people formally or informally. If people want to work with me, great. If they just want to touch base, that would be fine with me too. And Vicki is a great resource, as I'm sure you all know, not only in terms of financial planning about college, but also as a divorce coach and helping people through transitions and relationship issues.
Thank you. Thank you. Divorce and finances. That's
That's it.
Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us today on College Financial Preps Preparing for College podcast. See you next time. Thanks, Marc.